Have you ever been going through a really hard time and someone tells you to just have faith and you kind of want to punch them in the face? Or maybe you started consoling somebody about their divorce, only to realize they threw a whole party about it to celebrate, and you're standing there feeling like a dummy with your sympathy face on. Here's what nobody talks about. We're all walking around with these secret dictionaries in our head. The same words, completely different meanings. And we're out here having conversations, thinking that we're on the same page, when really, we might as well be speaking German to one another. I learned this when my former boss said that we needed to pivot our strategy. And I'm thinking, evolving our approach based on market feedback and customer research. Well, he meant firing half of our team and completely changing our business model without really telling anyone. But this goes way deeper than just business communications. We're losing the ability to truly connect across generations, across experiences, across the basic human need to be understood.
If those ancestors hadn't orally passed down their words to the next generation and the next, would we know anything about anything? And I fear that with emojis. I fear that our emojis, now just picture this on the side of a rock, our smiley faces, our one with a tear, our heart, God knows a pile of poop could be there, right? That's an emoji that gets used. The importance of communication, I just don't want it to be lost.
Your brain collects definitions your whole life based on what you've actually lived through. So when someone who grew up in chaos hears boundaries, they might think about walls and isolation, but someone else can hear the same word and think about self-respect and clarity. When someone says vulnerability, one person might picture weakness and danger, while another sees courage and connection. This isn't just semantics. Your nervous system literally fires up different patterns based on your history with each word. So every time you hear commitment, your body pulls up every memory and emotion tied to that concept, which explains why the same conversation can feel like safety to one person and suffocation to another. I find it interesting that ancient wisdom traditions understood that language shapes reality. The story we tell ourselves and the meaning that we attach to our experiences literally create our world. When you're unconscious about the definitions that you're carrying around, you're operating on autopilot, just assuming everyone else sees through your lens. Meanwhile, you're missing opportunities for real connection because you're talking past each other. You're staying stuck in conversations that go nowhere because nobody's actually understanding what anyone else means. You're building walls instead of bridges, all because you never really thought to ask what someone actually meant by the words coming out of their mouth. Research shows that we know about 20,000 words, but each one carries completely unique emotional weight based on our personal histories. That's 20,000 potential miscommunications just waiting to happen. We're all speaking slightly different languages while thinking we're in the same conversation. But when you get conscious about this, when you start getting curious instead of making assumptions, everything changes. You realize that your differences aren't threats to defend against. They're more like invitations to expand your understanding. But here's the big one. You start seeing that maybe you need all of these different perspectives to get the full picture of what it means to be human. And that's the part that's going to change your life, because the meaning that you've been carrying around for a word that causes you pain, it's not carved in stone. You can consciously choose to reframe your relationship with any concept. Sometimes healing starts with something as simple as realizing that your definition of selfish might actually be someone else's definition of self-care. So what if the words that have been limiting you could become the keys to your freedom? Today, our guest is Donna Reed. She's a 67-year-old author who discovered the power of conscious language while writing a book exploring different meanings behind everyday words. Her journey shows us how our relationship with language evolves as we grow and why getting intentional about communication can change everything. I'm Melissa Monti, and you're listening to Mind Love. Today, you'll learn how to catch yourself projecting your definitions onto others and create a real understanding instead. Why the stories you tell yourself about tough experiences keep you stuck, and how reframing heavy words unlocks healing. And the communication patterns that show when you're assuming versus getting curious, and how this one shift changes everything. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys, workplace stress is killing us. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal. So if you're feeling it, you are not alone. I used to think I could just push through everything, work harder, sleep less, pretend I had it all figured out. But that approach nearly broke me. I am all about following your joy. If that voice in your head is telling you to make a change, listen to it. Maybe you are ready to quit your job. Maybe you do need to flip your whole life upside down. But either way, you need support and tools to navigate it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without feeling guilty, how to manage anxiety before it spirals, how to make big moves from a place of strength instead of desperation. And BetterHelp has over 30,000 therapists and has helped 5 million people worldwide. And you can talk to someone from your couch. No waiting rooms, no awkward scheduling. Therapy gives you the clarity on whether that voice telling you to make a change is your intuition or just the Sunday scaries. But either way, you deserve support. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. So what inspired you to reframe F words? And I need to say that I love this idea. I feel like my whole life is about reframing everything, even the things that people think are just solid. I'm like, let's think about that. Let's bring some conscious awareness there. And I don't think any words well, I'm just very aware of when words have more connotation than the meaning is intending for them. So I was really excited when your book came across my path, and I'm curious in your inspiration for what got you here.
Yeah. So, when Zoom started, when COVID hit and all that was going on and nobody was going anywhere and we were online all the time, I started doing Zoom calls with my family, which is my brothers. And it was their spouses and the kids and the grandkids. And eventually it's just my brothers and I, because everybody else was tired of it. And after one of the calls, okay, I don't swear. I'm just not a swearer, but I really wanted to just log off the Zoom or hang up and be like, freaking family. Only it was worse than that. And I just told a friend of mine, I'm gonna write a book about F words because family means so many things to so many people. It's the birth family, the ones we choose, the pets, the girlfriends, the boyfriend, whatever. All and that's how it started. And then I had to choose how many F words I was going to do because people kept sending me words. So that's how it started.
So how has your relationship with family, the word or otherwise, evolved over time?
I feel pretty. Now I'm going to be conscious, by the way, of every F word I use.
I feel.
I'm pretty fortunate that I grew up in a family where mom and dad were married until my mom died. And for the most part, we were kids that did what we were supposed to do. And I got along with my brothers, albeit 7 years different from my youngest brother and things like that. But we were kind of the epitome of the Midwest kids that did our best, got good grades, followed the rules for the most part, that kind of thing. And then you marry and you move away and nobody lives back where we grew up. Nobody. And spouses and divorces and stepkids and not stepkids. And I moved from this town of 500 people to Tucson, which is where my husband was from. So from a place where there was 150 years of some of those family history to not knowing anybody here in Arizona. And moving a junior in high school and an eighth grader. And that junior did not like me for a while. And so then you start creating your chosen family. right? My husband's family was here, very different than my own. That's all I'll say about that. And your friends that you get to choose become your family, the people that you share your stories with, your secrets with, your good, the bad, the ugly. And in the meantime, still connecting with my siblings, albeit annually or every 2 years we see each other, something like that. That's just very different than the neighbor down the street, the one that brings your mail in when you go on vacation, right?
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting how you said you're going to be so aware of all the F words. And all of a sudden, I was hearing it almost like an F poem: feel fortunate, follow friends.
Yeah, yeah. It's really weird.
I think most of us understand this concept. That's not new, of realizing how family has evolved. But why do you feel that it's important to really bring a conscious awareness to the reframing of it? What does that do for us?
I because I think that if you live a certain way, and I'll go back to me because all I have is my story. When I was 18, I left home for the first time and I joined this international singing group. And in my brain, everybody coming was going to come from a mom, a dad, and siblings and get here. And at that point, we weren't even discussing, nobody was talking about heterosexual versus, any LGBTQ, any of that. So it was this huge awakening for me about how we're all people born somewhere into families that are entirely different. And what I saw or see through my eyes and my lens isn't the same as what somebody else sees. Uh, so, so to take a step back, and I think this in today's world, Melissa, I am a big traveler of the world, and no matter where you go, you see people who just want to be happy and healthy and have their children protected and live and love. And it doesn't matter if they're tall or short or disability or black or white or purple. we we just have to be able to adjust what we thought and created in our minds to the world around us.
One thing I have evolved into over the years is how much intention I put behind my reframes. And when I'm
Mm.
looking at the phases of my life and with my understanding of the word family, for example, when I first went to college, all of a sudden I wanted nothing to do with my family. I mean, I still went and visited, I still loved them, but I kind of dreaded going back home. Like, I was having so much fun in college and this was my new family. But then as I continued through life that way, I spent way too long partying. I kept thinking these people were my family. These people were my family because we were always together. I mean, you bond on a bender more than you bond at Thanksgiving. I will tell you that, because it's now Sunday morning. You've been doing God knows what since Friday evening and you've talked about everything. But then if it came down to asking someone for a ride to the airport, no one was there.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, who can you really rely on?
Yeah, and I think when you are bonding over an illusion like drugs or alcohol, it creates an illusory bond. It creates it's the substance that's bonding you together, not the natural feelings of oxytocin and love and things that actually arise in a relationship. And so then I ended up in entrepreneur circles. Now I'm in a small little mountain town and I'm actually in that process of rebuilding my family and redefining what that looks like. And from the place that I'm at now, I need to start from scratch, because what I thought was true connection 10 years ago, 20 years ago is not how I define the people that I want to grow with for the rest of my life now. And so
Right.
it's just interesting that this topic is coming up, because I'm spending time on that. What does that really look like? What is really important to me? And I found that with everything that I've built, when there is a lack of really conscious conversation, whether people are spiritual or they're going down this personal development, if I don't have that with people, I feel alone. I feel like I'm on this ride by myself. I don't care how much time I'm spending with particular people. So that's kind of where I'm at in this family redefinition phase.
Yeah. So I have a book club that's been meeting at my house for 8 years, 9 years. I don't know how many years. And right now we're using my book. And I'm just going to tell you that I'm the youngest in the group, and I probably could be your mother. And so we span 15 to 20 years, the people coming. And each week we take 2 words out of the book and talk if somebody else focuses on it. And so tomorrow we're doing flow and family. We haven't done those 2 words. And everybody's meanings around a word. For instance, the word foray is in the book. So for me, foray is like singing into the unknown, or whatever. You're just going to do this adventure. The oldest woman in the group goes, it came from war. It came from taking over people's lands. And I was like, what? And so her idea when she read what I wrote didn't make any sense because we come from a different generation and a different place. And language evolves so much that just think of fire. I don't know how old you are, Melissa, but when
40.
a kid walks in my office and goes, she's so fire. I'm like, what? And then the boys, the kids who are younger than my children are like, Donna, it means da 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 da. And right now, I think, I don't know this for sure. This is just my research in my head. Starting with like 16-year-olds to the people that are in their mid 80s, would we have 5 to 6 generations of people? Some across all of those in a workforce. The kid working in the kitchen at an assisted living place could well be taking care of my elderly father or something like that. Their idea of meaning of words and emojis, and things is so different across the generations. And I think that language evolves, and in the world of text and abbreviations and everything, if we don't talk, we're losing it. We need this communication and the ability to look and see what grandpa and grandma and great grandma and the kids are talking about.
I was just talking to a friend who's been trying to hire someone for 3 months. 3 months. She's been posting on random job boards, scrolling through resumes that make no sense, getting ghosted by candidates. It's a mess. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the very top of the page for your relevant candidates so that you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it just makes hiring so fast because you're not wasting time on platforms where nobody's actually looking. Your job gets in front of real candidates who are actively searching. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Yeah, well, because if you think about, I think it's 90% or something of communication is body language. And so we're missing all that. And we think that by putting this little yellow face with like
A smile?
Well, this smile didn't have the rosy cheeks. So is there a passive aggressiveness in there? She's not super happy. She's not glowing smiling. It's just like, wait, is that a flat smile? Like, there's so much subtext in an emoji, like the thumbs up emoji. It's so funny. I had to tell my cousin, I'm 40. My cousin's 43 or 44, and I'll say something and then she'll just put back the thumbs up emoji, and I'm like, why are you so passive aggressive? And she's like, what do you mean? I just mean like I got it. I was like, no, the thumbs up is like, okay.
And if you're saying thumbs up to somebody, but the person up above you put a heart, do you feel like you're snubbing the person?
Yeah, you should. You should, Donna. Yeah.
And then I'm like, ooh, I better make them all hearts. Does that mean I loved everything?
For a long time, I think the trend has kind of died down, but right when Apple came out with the, what are they even called now? The memojis or something like that. But you could basically record yourself and it like made you like an elephant or something. You talk. And so every time I sent people, instead of text messages, I was just sending voice memos with like me as a kangaroo or whatever my little thing is. I was like, well, at least you can kind of get the hints, but if I still have a little undertone, then it's going to slip right by. But what do you think? What do you think is being created with these generational gaps? Even within generations, a lot can be lost within a text conversation.
Yeah.
And on one hand, well, I wanted to say on one hand, communication is so much more quick. But when I feel very blessed. I love my generation. I'm an elder millennial, and I really feel like the last group of people to experience, like I went through all of high school. I ended up getting a cell phone in high school, but it was not a smartphone. We were like, I had a pager at one point where we were doing pager code. So you could get like one come over across, but not much more like meet me at,
You're the age of my kids, Melissa. I have a 38-year-old and a 41-year-old.
Oh, yes. So but it was the most beautiful generation. We were still present at concerts. We weren't trying to record it. Even if I had one quick question for my best friend, I picked up the phone and then maybe we'd end up having a whole conversation. We were playing outside. And so I wanted to say, well, text is so fast and you can be in constant communication with people, but it's not the same kind of constant communication. I don't feel connected. Even my best friend who will text back and forth and then she'll drop off and I'm like, but wait, I was invested in this. I don't even know what you're doing. Like there's no goodbye. I'm actually at dinner right now. And so it's going to be, so I'm like waiting, feeling kind of abandoned.
Yes. My son, Adam, he's I think 41 this year. He'll say to me, he'll go, Mom, if you don't record it, did it not happen? And it's funny to get that from him because we talk about, okay, he's on Instagram and I don't do that much on Instagram and Reels, and there's so many things to figure out. But for me, living where I live, and maybe you, where you are, I don't know, it's 3 miles for me to go and see petroglyphs. All I have to do is drive to the mountains and I can see mountain peaks and horses and suns and things in the rocks that are right there. I know that they are ancient, right? I know that they are part of a story or something from Indigenous people and Native Americans. But I don't know the story. I only know those images and what I create. So if those ancestors hadn't orally passed down their words to the next generation and the next, would we know anything about anything? And I fear that with emojis. I fear that our emojis, now just picture this on the side of a rock, our smiley faces, our one with a tear, our heart, God knows a pile of poop could be there, right? That's an emoji that gets used. And the importance of communication, I just don't want it to be lost. I just don't,
Yeah. One of my biggest passions, and I think it's because of I was raised in a religion that I then felt just not aligned with, but I still had all the fear because of all of the formative years of being told about heaven and hell and all of these things that I no longer believe. But part of my disentangling of that was going back and understanding, okay, well, when was this compiled? Who compiled it? Who was in power at that time? What were the original texts like? What's been hidden from us? And one of the things that comes up, though, is realizing how, like, even the Bible or many of our holy texts, it was passed down orally for hundreds of years before it was ever even written down. And then it was written down by scribes that were not professional scribes that had their own biases. And who knows who was over them being like, you better write that. Like, we don't know any of that. And so then it brings us to, if we're passing things down orally, we're getting a lot more. I know I said 90% body language, but it's actually, it is true that only 7% of communication is actual words spoken. 38% is tone of voice. And then 55 is body language, including emotions. So there's a lot in there. And so then it's like, if you're passing it down written, you're only getting 7% of that meaning, because you cannot get tone or real emotion unless they're really visceral about that. And so, but then oral, which is why a testimony in the court of law isn't reliable. And so how do you bridge those things? Because it's like, it's not reliable unless you're writing it down. But if you're writing it down, you only get 7%. Is there really any way to pass down what we mean?
Boy, that's a big question. Because we all hear from our own perspective. So I don't know, you said you have a sibling, right? Did you say?
I have 2 stepbrothers, but I'm kind of an only child, and that's a whole other thing we can get into.
Okay. So I have 3 brothers and 3 sons. And so I grew up in a world of testosterone, and then I raised that, and I'm going to see my brothers at the end of next month. We're going to a festival back in our hometown in Ohio for a reunion. We are as different as night and day, even though we are all from the same parents. And, there's a piece of me that thinks, there's nature versus nurture and all that. But I think from the moment of conception, we are who we are at some level. And what I see and hear, and what my older brother sees and hears, and what my youngest brother, we can all be in the same room at the same time around the same table and come away with an entirely different story. Thus, what you were saying about writing it down. And it makes me think about when you go to court, you were a witness to a car accident. Have you ever been a witness to a car accident and been asked what you saw?
Yes. I actually didn't understand why I was so confused when I was trying to relate. I saw a motorcycle accident. I was like, oh, I'm very clear, until they start asking questions. And I was like, wait, what did happen first? And was it on this side? I had no idea. It was humbling.
Yes. And I had somebody turning in front, and they turned on what was already a red light, and there was an accident. And I was like, ooh, that person shouldn't have gone. And then they started asking me questions. Well, was it yellow? But I don't know. I just knew they shouldn't have gone.
Because you remember your meaning. You actually remember your interpretation and your perspective over the facts, because that's what you're feeling. But then it makes me wonder. So I don't know what your spiritual beliefs are, but I believe that we're all aspects of God experiencing itself, and we need the different perspectives, because that's what we're here for. None of us is meant to have the exact same perspective of somebody else. Otherwise, there'd be a gap in the matrix. So this has been helpful for me in accepting other perspectives, because I know that we need it for the balance. Like, imagine if everybody thought the same way about political views.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen I'm very center now. I don't align with either side. And it's interesting being in that point. I mean, even that has its own biases. I'm not going to say I'm unscathed, but I end up having different ones from the ones that are being shouted to me on either side. And from this place, I can see where, I was very aligned with one side, and then I saw how it almost got too much. It like swung the pendulum too much to where I'm like, I think we ventured over into crazy. And that's what would happen if we all thought that way. We would just keep going, and we'd be like not understand how to label anybody with anything, which I'm arguably could have some benefits, but would also be very confusing. I think sometimes we need this to just ground ourselves into our human experience here.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking about it the other day. I'm working on a speech for something I'm going to do when I'm back at home at the end of July. And the stories, the way we use language, the way we pronounced creek, crick, the way that, we ended sentences with prepositions, just things that I know you can pinpoint the part of a country somebody is from based on that. And in the writing of the book, that was part of it. I would ask people, there's a couple of words in the book that are not English. I wanted to write about windows. And so I used fenêtre, which is French, because I thought, okay, that's a way to get away with it. And then I have a word that's both in Swedish and Norwegian that we just don't even have. And so if you have words in your language that can't even be translated into my language without a whole sentence, clearly our lives and our stories are different. We're expressing them differently. And that was part of the discovery of this, and then the redoing of things. As you reread it and you edit it 10 times and there's still a mistake. all of those things. I also have talked a lot. There's a young man, he's coming at 10 o'clock because we're going to go look at a house together. He's a realtor. And I'm just going to tell you, he heard me on the phone in the car. And I said to an agent, if I had my druthers, I would have priced it at this price. And I hung up and he goes, what are druthers? And I said, would rather, druthers. But the lady on the phone knew what I meant. And his mom called and his stepdad. Mom, do you know what druthers are? One of them did, one of them didn't. A generational thing that where I grew up just made total sense and made no sense to him. And he grew up, he's Hispanic in Arizona and doesn't speak a word of Spanish. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? So, but he knows all the acronyms. Okay, at your age, did you know what FOMOHOCO was? FOMOHOCO.
I definitely know what FOMO is, but
okay.
What is
missing out on homecoming? Uh-huh. And there were big signs on Facebook with these people whose kids were going to homecoming, and I'm like, are you just lazy? And you but that's one of those things, Melissa, sometimes I'll tell my family, we'll be sitting around a table and you start out with one conversation and then it breaks off, right? And people are having separate conversations, or you're talking over someone who's down at the end of the table. And I have joked that if an alien came down and was just listening, they'd just leave. Because, like, what are they talking about? And I feel a little bit that way with AI. I don't know how you feel about AI, but
Well, I never thought I would be the older you're younger and you're like, no, it's pretty easy to stay up with the words, Mom. Like, stop acting like I'm speaking a foreign language. And then, I did get older and I evolved, and the new words just kind of naturally slipped into my vocabulary. And then it got to a point and I was left out. I don't know what it is. My brain, I'm like, I can't say no cap. Seriously. I don't. And sometimes these words I use as examples and I don't even remember what I have to relook up the definition of what it is. And I'm just like, no, it's too ridiculous. But part of me wonders, I've learned a lot through hosting this podcast, and I've had a lot of guests on exploring different ways of relating, whether it's how to have difficult conversations better, how to be likable, how to, bring people in rather than exclude people from your point of view, things like that. And a big thing that comes up is curiosity. And I tuned into this church in Sedona, the Global Center of Christ Consciousness. So it's a really,
that sounds like Sedona.
yes. And I I was just listening yesterday, and he had this really fascinating uh, sermon, I guess you call it,
Mhm.
um, on the middle path. And he talked about, and I really needed to hear it because I've done so much research and things that sometimes I'm like, I really like to know everything about it so I can form my opinion. But then if I go that way, I feel too set in my opinion. Like, no, I know this is the right way. I just spent 3 years researching it. You just kind of accepted it. Like, let's talk about it, you know? And so, but I was talking about, hearing, and he used the example of diets because that's a very hot topic where it's like vegan or not vegan. And I've been on both sides, and I actually feel very strongly about not being vegan now. But it's, and when I first became vegan, that first year was so strongly about it. I needed to tell people about it. And then over the next 4 years, it kind of died off. And then when I switched back to meat, I felt very strongly. And now it's dying off. And I'm like, oh, yeah, now I can just be very neutral about people's diets. But he's talking about this example. So I'm like, thank you. This is for me. And he said, it's that leaning in and being curious about, well, what does that mean to you? And that brings me to your topic of there's all these different words, and I'm sure you even unraveled more as
Oh,
you
yeah.
went into it. Like, yeah, I didn't even realize the connotations in this F word and in this F word. And we could arguably do that with every word in the English language.
Yeah.
And so how beautiful is it to just know we're all going to be coming from different perspectives. There's less assumptions in the conversation and more opportunities to say, well, what does this mean to you?
Yeah. That is, in my opinion, part of opening your mind, opening your heart, traveling the world, talking to people of all different ages, all different places. I grew up in a town that was settled by 9 German men. We were pretty white. And again, some people, my family was in that town 40 years, but some people 150 to 200 years. That when I go back at the end of this month, the young lady who used to babysit for me, who's in charge of the festival, lives in her great grandmother's home and married the kid down the block. And they're still, the world has changed and they're more open-minded because we're not all stuck in this place anymore because of the internet, because of the ease of travel compared to even when I was a kid. But I think that the moment you go anywhere, and I'm going to say go anywhere virtually, join an online Zoom that's an international one in real estate, passing deals across the country. When I go, I tour homes in Scotland and in France and wherever I can to hear the words, hear what they say, how they do it, how they sell it, how they process it. And if you don't open yourself up at some time or have parents that are guiding you to open yourself up to the world, it's really easy to get stuck in my way or the highway, right? And I think inherently I always was that person, but when I left home at 18 and traveled the world in this singing group, it became way more evident that yep, we're all humans. And yep, we all have different stories, and yet we all live differently. And it's not up to me to tell you what your story is. It, it's up to me to share. Yeah.
I wonder too, when we're listening, oh, because we're going to have a different perspective. If you tell me a story, even if you tell me the story with all of the meaning that you've already applied to your story,
Mhm.
I'm probably still going to see something different. And I wonder if we're really thinking about the collective consciousness, what does that add, even if I don't say anything out loud? I think that's where we misstep a little bit, is where we hear something and we're like, oh no, but you have to see mine and acknowledge it. And we all want to be seen and acknowledged. But I think it's still seen and acknowledged just by experiencing and witnessing it without me convincing someone else that my perspective exists.
Were you the kind of student that raised your hand before the question was over? Like,
Yeah, why can you tell?
no, no, but and I was, and I think that goes back to hearing and listening and acknowledging. And listening is a growth for people, to to not automatically be thinking of your response or what you think it should be and going, ooh, 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 pick me, before they're even finished with their story. And I was that kid. Yeah, I raised my hand all the time. I was like, what's wrong with you people not answering this question? And we have to learn to listen in order to learn or understand anything, before we're ready to interject our opinions and correct them or tell them why we're right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I have had an evolution with this idea because playing devil's advocate a little bit, I think we lose something the moment we bring words to it. Like, you know how when you have dreams and then you come out and it's so clear and you're like, you just woke up, it's still, all of the details are there, but then you try to write it down. It's almost like how we talked about witnessing a car accident, only even another layer, because you start to realize how many things felt like they made perfect sense until you tried to bring them into this realm or you tried to bring it through to words, and it loses a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, have you listened to the podcast, The Telepathy Tapes?
No.
So fascinating.
Ooh.
It's actually a deep dive into autistic children and realizing how many of them are telepathic and they've been communicating telepathically.
That gives me chills.
It's taken the world by storm because since this has come out, a lot of people that have autistic kids that really thought that their kids were just like not in there, they found ways to communicate since coming out with this. And all of a sudden they realized how bright they are, how deep they are, that they've been communicating all this time. And they've realized they didn't find out until they were 18 years old. It's so fascinating. But even with my dives into spirituality, I believe that we lose something when we bring words to it. And the autistic people in this podcast have brought that up. Like, oh yeah, we lose so much when we talk. It's so much more effort to talk. It's so much more flat, using one of your words. And so on one hand, there's been times where I'm talking to somebody and I already know what they're going to say. And I feel like it can go faster, especially back when I used to be on Adderall. Like, I'm just like sitting there like, I know. And then they force me to wait. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I knew all that. The extra 3 minutes you didn't need. And so there's that aspect. But even as I say it right now, and what I came to is, yeah, if you're that deeply connected and if there's that agreement that that's how you're connecting. But if one person's communicating with one way, it's not just rude, it's almost assumptuous. Even if you are picking up more than they're giving out, they're expressing in one way, and that's what they want to be acknowledged. And so it takes patience and presence and all of that to actually hear, because it's more than just understanding what's underneath. It's choosing to see them in the way that they're presenting and what they're trying to get across, their expression of it.
Right. I I had the other day what I would consider the worst date ever.
I'm sorry. Are you okay now?
I know it was that, and he spent 6 hours studying the fact that he was an Aries man and I was a Cancer woman with a Gemini sign rising. So when we met, he knew everything about me. Like it. If people could see my face, I know we're not going to be on camera. and so if I went like this, he would go, oh, if I leaned in. Or if I crossed my legs from one side to the other because they was falling asleep. Ooh, and I thought, you don't know me. And okay, yes, there are some things about, astrology that I find interesting. But he had made all of his decisions about everything. I can't even tell you, I'm 67 years old and I've never experienced anything like it because he didn't even give me a chance to express what I think. And when he said, I don't think you want a boyfriend, just like that, you don't want a boyfriend, even if it's me, you don't want a boyfriend. And I was like, I've known you, I've talked to you for 30 minutes. How do you And when I came home and I was like, well, I may not want a boyfriend and I may, but it's not you. And that was totally an experience of someone who had predetermined everything about me based on this perception of where I was born, what year, in what place, under what sign. And I was like, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it still flabbergasts me, which is another great F word that I didn't put in the book.
What comes up for me is projection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what a lot of people miss in communication too, is how often they're projecting. And I think that the way I believe that the laws of the universe work is we end up becoming teachers for one another. And so it's kind of like how I know I'm the villain in somebody's story and probably a couple people's story, and we all hate that. And then there's other people that are the villain in my story. And then oftentimes it's like if I have a villain, then it's like I want other people to agree that they're the villain. But when I do that, I actually bring on karma to myself because I'm forcing people into what could have been my projection of them. It's my experience of that person isn't necessarily the experience of somebody else. And so the way I get to this, if I was in your experience, I'd be like, okay, what was I supposed to see in that? But also the other guy, he's so interested in proving his own ideas about something that he's going to project that onto you and probably even pull out some of those traits, and maybe even you end up doing things that you wouldn't normally do in a conversation that's proving him right just because his projection is so strong.
Yeah. I never had anybody tell me that I was the hard-shelled crab that just needed to be cracked open.
I think we should call him and get him on this interview.
Just kidding. Oh no. I need to just remove that whole thing. It was so recent with what we're talking about. Yeah. Something else, Melissa, that I'm doing. I don't know how much of my book you had a chance to look at, or certain words. What I find is, because there's no rhyme or reason to the sequencing, that people open to a word they find interesting and read it. And fortuitous is one of the words that I really, really like. And what I have discovered over the last couple of years, I don't remember exactly when I wrote that. I don't know if it was 22 or I started the book in 22. I don't remember. But the story that I wrote about was about my son getting COVID before we knew it was COVID. And then they thought he had a blood clot and it was a tumor. And COVID saved his life, honestly, before we even knew what COVID was. So fast forward, it's 3 years later, however many. And this all happened to him in early 2020, going into 21. Well, about 6 months ago, I got a new car. It has way better suspension than my old one. And I was driving home and I did a tiny little thing like this. I was getting an earbud out of an ear, and I hit the railing on the side of the road, on a dark road, on a back road, and almost flipped the car 3 weeks after I bought it.
Oh, no.
So as I think about the word fortuitous, maybe that would have been the story I would write now, because I was only going 60 instead of 80 on the busy highway with a gazillion other cars, because I took the back road home. I didn't roll the car. It scraped the doors a little bit, but everything opened and closed. And I find myself thinking how fortuitous it was that it wasn't way worse, and that I didn't wreck the car or die on a back road in Arizona. And so even that one word, which has so much meaning for me related to my son's miraculous health at this point, if I was writing it today, this is a newer story in my life that might be the one that I recorded. And what I hope is that if people read it, they start thinking about, was it fortuitous that I missed the plane that day? Was it for whatever? The things that can look bad in the moment. And if you take a deep breath, you're like, oh, I was lucky. That was fortuitous that happened.
Let me ask you something. How much time did you spend last week thinking about what to eat? Planning meals, making grocery lists, wandering around the store like a lost tourist. I used to waste entire Sunday afternoons on this, and it was exhausting. Then I found Hungry Root. Hungry Root fills your cart with personalized picks and plans your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. They have over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, and most are ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm actually headed to Michigan this week, and I had my Hungry Root order delivered there. So I already know that I have meals ready and plenty of snacks for the kids without scrambling to find a grocery store. It's just handled. And what I love most is their smart cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements just for me. So no more buying spinach that rots in my fridge. They screen out over 200 additives and only source high quality ingredients. The time I've gotten back has just been life-changing. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE. I have a little mantra. Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. Have you?
That's great.
Have you heard of the Taoist parable around that with the farmer?
No, not the
So
details.
there was an old farmer who worked his crops for many years, and one day his horse ran away, and his neighbors came to visit. Such bad luck, they said with sympathy, and the farmer just replied, maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. Well, a few days later, the horse returned, bringing with it 3 wild horses. Oh my gosh, how wonderful, all the neighbors said, and the farmer smiled. Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. And then the next day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the untamed horses and was thrown off and broke his leg. And the neighbors came and said, oh, what a tragedy. And the farmer said, maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. And a week later, military officials came to the village to draft young men into the army. But seeing that the son's leg was broken, they passed him by. And the neighbors congratulated the farmer on how well things had turned out. And he said, maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. And so it just reminds you that you never know you never know the full story in the moment. And we so often label things good or bad, but it's all a part of a much larger unfolding. And so I think that wisdom often looks more like neutrality or just presence in the unknown.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I don't know that you can put a year or a date or a time when this evolution started. And I know for me, much of it has been since I came back to Arizona. I lived 20 years married in Ohio, and then we moved back here. So I've been here 25 years. Was me having the kids graduate, leave home, a lot with my husband. My husband, we divorced, and then he died a year later. And all of a sudden, it's Donna. It's only Donna creating her life, whatever that is. And Donna at 52 doesn't know what Donna at 22 would have done. Because at 22 or 23 or 25, I would have had 3 little kids, right? So each day becomes a learning experience. And as you experience things, whatever they are, I would like to think that you adjust your judgment, your truths that are unshakable. No, maybe they're shakeable. All of those things that come with just living life. Because when you're young, those first 5, mom and dad or whoever say, do this, don't do that. And either you get your bottom paddled or you do it or you don't. And then one day you have your own thought. And you mentioned for you, somewhere along the line, it was religion. It was, what you were raised in. And my kids are exactly the same. They want mom to be happy. And if praying helps her, cool.
I pray. I still pray. I just do it outside of the confines of religion. But I still love the Bible. I just also love other holy books. And I love But have you ever gone back to... I was just having a conversation with a friend this weekend, and she was talking about how something came up for her around her mom's death. And she's just like, man, was long ago. I didn't expect for the emotions to still be so raw. And what I learned through inner child work, because for some reason, whenever inner child work comes up. It's so deep for me. And there have been different things that have occurred throughout my life that are kind of traumas. And for a long time, I was like, wait, why am I not getting over this? Why do I keep coming back to this? And I felt the same as her. But what I've come to, and this is what I teach in I help people process their stories, but is that we've all seen the whole growth isn't a straight line and it's kind of like a up and down, but overall it's an upward trajectory. Well, I used to agree with that, but I actually think it's a little more complex. I think it's more like a spiral.
Oh,
And it's kind of like how when you're driving up a mountain and you're coming up and you see this one view overlooking the city, and then you kind of go around and then you come back to that view and all of a sudden it's the same view, but it's from a higher perspective. And so I think that's why we end up, or it's powerful to revisit times in our life as we grow, because even if even if I visited something 2 years ago and I saw it from a higher perspective, I have an even higher one now. I've gone up even higher on that mountain, and there's still more information to be gathered from it. And so that's what I love about the reframing of words, because we can reframe words every single word in a book. But if we do this in another 20 years, we're going to have even more insights from who we've become.
yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I was telling a friend the other day, one of my good friends here um, developed polio at 18 months old. She barely remembers walking as and I have learned so much about disabilities related to knowing her and knowing her as a good friend. I'm tall, I'm 5'10, she's like 5'1. And so getting in and out of a car, walking behind cars that she's almost can't be seen in the rear view mirror, being asked to speak because she's a speaker, being asked to speak, and then there's only steps to get up to the podium, and it just so what we learn and develop through time, hopefully enhances our perspective, maybe changes our perspective, and helps us become more understanding about the world in general. Because it's really easy to make assumptions about something you know nothing about.
Yeah. I know. I feel like that's what the ego is. It's an assumption machine. It's a meaning making machine. And so the only way to release the assumptions is to actually step back into that
Yeah.
observer mindset. You know what I realized though?
What?
It's interesting. Why did you choose F as the words that you wanted to redefine?
Um, because it started with my family, and I again, so am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah, I have it explicit just in case. I just want to say whatever the fuck I
Okay,
want.
so I was like, fucking family. And I don't say that. And I didn't even want to put that word in the book. And my kids were like, Mom, if you title it F words and you don't even have that word in there, it's a noun, it's a verb, it's blah, 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 it's global. So I did. I don't know if you looked under a skull and crossbones at the back of the book. But it was literally family and that made me choose to write about F words. And I could do a whole second edition of F words or one of every letter of the alphabet now if I wanted to, because as I wrote and as now it was published last fall, as I hear people's discussions of it and as I focus on it more from a language and learning perspective and less about the explicit meaning of the word, what is a farm, you know, it it continues an evolution for me. And so I don't know if there'll be another one. I don't know if there'll be another letter.
I think there could be, and here's my reason, because
Okay.
I realize, do you know how many numbers start with the letter F? Like out of 124 of them, because you got all the 40s and the 50s. Uh, and that's 24%, which is just a really huge out of 1 through 100. But if you think about it, F all of these words that I love, like frequency, friction, forward motion, it's all words that have to do with moving energy, force, feeling, freedom, faith, fall, flight, like
See, I
failure.
hadn't thought of that. That's very cool.
It just feels like it just feels kind of like a mirror shaped by stories. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting because F, yeah, I don't. I'd have to look it up, but I don't feel like as many numbers have another starting letter. There's something to it.
That's so cool. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to like do that in my head. I'm going to say, like, is this for real? Yeah. One of the words that some of the younger people, a couple of 18-year-olds and stuff who are children of my friends who came to the original book releases, they chose the word finite, 2 or 3 of them, as one of the words that they found interesting. And that to me was interesting because it made them reflect on the fact that what's happening now is never going to happen again. And that this experience right now, I'm a senior in high school, woo, 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 I'm choosing my college, woo, 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 never going to happen again, right? Those things are finite moments. And tomorrow there'll be another one. And then after that, there'll be another one, which add to the continuum of our life, right? So a word that means now, in the now, right now, finite, it's going to end, also continues. It's
Right.
just weird.
Yeah. I mean, because ending is an illusion in general. Like the
Right.
present moment never ends, and all we have is the present moment. And it's only finite when you're looking at it in hindsight that will never happen again. But you're
Yeah.
still in the same moment you were in before.
Yeah.
It's like, are you moving through it or is the moment moving through you?
Ooh, that's good. I might have to post that.
Gotta credit me now.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But yeah, I will. I already posted we were
No,
doing
I'm
this
just kidding.
today.
It's actually funny. There's been quite a few quotes that people have just taken from me. And I'm like, all of a sudden it's online. I was like, I have the recording of that, right? Like I can prove where that came from.
That's not yours.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious, through your writing of this book, what do you feel like, diving into which word changed you the most?
Books here. I already mentioned fortuitous. I think that that's one. Um, is it weird to say that I have female and feminine together? And because of our world we live in right now, related to what feminine even means, growing up with 3 brothers, we didn't talk femininity, and in my generation, even any talk about sex and all that was very limited. But one of my friends here is a retired Air Force chief who has talked about female, feminine, and freedom because for 30 years she was a leader in the Air Force with rules about how she could look, how her nails could be, what color her hair could be, if she could wear earrings, if she, and all that time fighting for our freedom alongside a whole bunch of men. And as we have gender conversations and all of that, things that I don't necessarily understand, just being a woman in today's world, in my 60s, still figuring out life, what I want to be when I grow up, that means a lot to me. I think that 40 years ago, there's an F word with a number. I wouldn't have even had this platform or this opportunity to do and be. It wasn't even in my head. So maybe just being female or feminine.
Oh, I love that. It brings me to my final question. I love leaving people with something to ground this into their reality, like bring meaning from it. If you were to leave people with one question or thought or action to do this week based on what you're bringing into the world, what would you leave them with?
I thought about this. I would suggest to everyone who considers themselves older, if that's you at 40, whatever, or me at 60, or a friend at 80, Find someone that you consider younger and have a conversation with them. If it's a teenager, ask them to show you something on your cell phone. And teenagers, talk to your grandpa and grandma if they're around. Play mahjong with them. Ask them their stories. It's easy for us to get caught up with our circle and to not be aware of the other generations. So I would challenge people to share a story and talk to somebody who's of an entirely different place in time than they are.
I love that. I'm going to do that. I've always loved talking to people older than me, but now I'm in this really beautiful place where I feel like I fit in more. Like something about 40 for me, I'm like, no, yeah, I actually go back and forth between either group, you know? I'm not a regular mom, I'm the cool mom. Just kidding. But but I have a nanny who is 21, and we hired her when she was 18. And I love it. She's always, I'm like, yeah, what do I need to know? Keep me up with the things. But I still find myself like, new tattoo? Okay. Reacting like my mom would. Meanwhile, I'm like, I only tell you because I hate mine. But yeah. And if you ever need an AI masterclass, I'm your girl. I go deeper than the youngins. So I'm like developing with it over here. So
I use it for listing houses. Because after
wonderful.
a while, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, tan house in Tucson, you got to figure out what
Well, for listeners who want to read your book and connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
It's at Amazon. It's on Amazon, and you can download it or you can buy it there. The publisher is Life Rich Publishing and Barnes & Noble, of course. So all the places. I don't have an audiobook yet, and I'm thinking about that.
You've been listening to Mind Love, and all the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/409. Your challenge for this week is to have a real conversation with someone from a completely different generation than you. So if you're older, find a teenager or someone in their 20s and ask them to teach you something new on your phone or explain a trend that you don't understand. And if you're younger, sit down with a grandparent or an elderly neighbor or an older coworker and ask them to share a story from their past. So the goal isn't just small talk. It's getting curious about how someone from a different time sees the world and what words and experiences mean to them. This simple act of giving your mind some love through curiosity does a whole lot more than just start conversations. It breaks down the invisible walls that we build between generations. And it reminds us that we're all just humans trying to figure life out, regardless of when we were born. But there's something else happening beneath the surface. When you step into someone else's perspective, especially across generations, you're actually expanding your own consciousness. Each person carries a completely unique collection of meanings and stories and wisdom based on when and how they've lived. So by getting curious about their inner world, you're not just learning about them. You're discovering new parts of yourself and seeing reality through fresh eyes. This is consciousness exploration in its most practical form. Every conversation becomes a chance to realize how much bigger the human experience is than your own slice of it. So you might discover that your definition of success or family or even happiness is just one of countless valid ways to see the world. So give it a try and let me know how it goes. You can reach out to me at mindlovemelissa on Instagram. I also want to know who you make these conversations with. Tag this episode, tag me on Instagram, and I will be resharing all of your posts. You can also find all of my incredible sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And if you want to stay connected and get weekday inspiration delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Morning Mind Love at mindlove.com or text the word morning to 33777. I'm Melissa Monti with Mind Love. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.